At 3:47 in the morning, Imani Weathers stood in the hallway of Bluff City Regional Hospital in Memphis, wearing scrubs the color of a winter sky and shoes that had logged more miles than most cars. She was 43 years old, earning 15.75 an hour, and she had not slept in 21 hours. Her phone buzzed. The screen showed one word, Mama. She had 4 patients still on her floor, a fever in room 9 that had not broken since midnight. She looked at the screen. She walked to the stairwell, sat on the top step, and called back. 10 hours earlier, a man named Jasper Cullins had signed a check for $340,000 in his office on the 31st floor of the Meridian Commerce Building in downtown Memphis. He did not visit the property. He did not ask why the price was $61,200 below the neighborhood average. His assistant sealed the envelope and logged the transaction complete. 9 minutes. Jasper was on his next call before the ink dried. 2 people, 1 house. A secret buried in a tin box under a bed that was about to make both of them answer for who they really were. If you are watching this right now, tell me your country and your local time in the comments. And if stories about dignity, justice, and the things people will fight for when everything else is gone, speak to your heart, subscribe, and stay with us. Hit that bell so you do not miss what comes next. This story starts in a hospital hallway at 3:47 in the morning. It ends somewhere you will not see coming. Stay with me. Imani Weathers had been working the night shift at Bluff City Regional for 11 years. She knew the sound of that building the way a person knows the sound of their own breathing. The particular hum of the HVAC on the 3rd floor that kicked louder after 2 a.m. The way the linoleum in the east corridor squeaked 3 steps past the supply closet every single night. The smell of the place, antiseptic and coffee, and something underneath both of those things she had never been able to name but recognized as the smell of people trying very hard to stay alive. She clocked in at 10:53 p.m. and clocked out at 7:04 a.m. 5 days a week. Sometimes 6 when someone called out, and the charge nurse looked at Imani with that expression that meant she already knew the answer before she asked. Imani never said no. Not because she could not use the rest, because the extra $94.50 for 6-hour overtime shift was $94.50 that went somewhere real. Her rent in Whitehaven was $780 a month. Her car note on a 2009 Honda Civic was $214 a month. The car had 189,000 miles on it and a check engine light that had been on since March of 2021. She had learned to ignore it the way you learn to ignore things that are not yet emergencies. Groceries ran $67 a week if she planned. Gas was $48 every 10 days. She kept a notebook in the kitchen drawer where she wrote the numbers down every Sunday night, the same way her mother had taught her, not to make herself feel bad, but to make sure she always knew where she stood. Every month on the 3rd Friday, she transferred $420 to an account in her mother's name at a credit union on Elvis Boulevard in Orange Mound. She had done this for 11 years without missing a single month. 11 years, 12 months, $420. Total was $55,440. She had never added it up that way. She thought about it as a rent payment on something that could not be calculated in dollars, the right of 2 people who had worked their entire lives to stay in the house they had earned. The house was on Carnes Avenue in Orange Mound, a neighborhood on the south side of Memphis that most people outside the city did not know existed, and that most people inside the city had decided they could afford to forget. Her father, Roy Weathers, had worked 31 years at a bottling plant on Lamar Avenue before his heart made the decision his pride never would have. Her mother, Cora, had cleaned offices downtown for 22 years, then private homes after that, then stopped when her knees made the stairs, an argument she was tired of having. The house was 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen looking out onto a backyard, where nothing much grew except the magnolia tree Cora had planted from a seed in the spring of 1991, taken from her own mother's yard, whose tree had stood there longer than anyone in the family could remember. The house had a front porch with 2 chairs that had their own weather stains, a furnace that rattled in December, a back door that required lifting slightly while turning the handle. It was not beautiful in the way that word usually gets used. It was something better. It was permanent. Or it was supposed to be. Imani had a cousin named Devontae Weathers, 9 years younger, who had grown up 2 streets over on Tutwiler Avenue. He was sharp in the way certain people are sharp, when they have decided early that sharpness is their only available weapon. She had seen it in him when he was 12, the kid who read the fine print on everything, who asked follow-up questions when adults gave vague answers, who noticed things others missed. She had believed in him before he had learned to believe in himself. When Devontae was 18, Imani was 27 and earning $12.40 an hour. She made a decision she would pay for his college, not because anyone asked, because she had watched him and she knew what he could become if someone removed the one obstacle between him and the room he was supposed to be in. She paid his tuition at Morehouse College for 4 years, then his law school fees at the University of Memphis for 3 years. The total across 7 years was $61,400. She did not ask for a repayment schedule. She did not make him sign anything. She told him once, the night before he started law school, "You do not owe me money. You owe the next person behind you the same door I opened for you." He looked at her and said he understood. She believed him. 6 months ago, Devante called on a Tuesday afternoon and asked to borrow $8,000. A slow period at the practice, a temporary cash flow issue. She transferred the money that same evening. He said he would pay her back within 90 days. The 90 days passed. When she mentioned it once, gently in a text, he replied with 2 words, "Working on it." She did not mention it again. In this family, you did not press a person about money when they were already carrying something heavy. That was the rule. She had lived by it her entire life. She did not yet know what that $8,000 was. According to FBI data, deed fraud targeting elderly Black homeowners is one of the fastest growing property crimes in America, rising more than 200% between 2018 and 2023. Historic Black neighborhoods like Orange Mound, where families have held land since the late 19th century, are among the most targeted. Many properties carry older documentation, paper deeds, and handwritten titles that predate digital recording systems. The owners are often elderly, isolated from legal resources, unaware that the equity in their homes has made them targets. The crime is designed to look like paperwork. It is designed to look like a family decision. It is designed to be over before anyone realizes what happened. Imani did not know any of this yet. She knew how to start an IV in the dark. She knew the name of every patient on her floor on any given night. She knew the third step in the east corridor squeaked, and she knew her mother's voice when something was wrong. It was wrong at 3:07 in the morning when she sat on the top step of the stairwell and heard Cora Weathers say, in a voice so small it barely traveled through the phone, these words, "Baby. Someone came today. They had papers. They said the house is not ours anymore. Your daddy's signature is on it." Roy says he does not remember signing anything. Imani sat without speaking for 4 seconds. The hospital hummed around her. The HVAC on the 3rd floor kicked louder, right on schedule. She asked one question. "Does Devante know about this?" Her mother was quiet for a long time. That silence was the only answer Imani needed. Jasper Cullins had built his first think with his hands at the age of 19, a storage shed behind a house on Joubert Avenue in South Memphis, framed with 2x4s he bought secondhand from a salvage yard on Winchester Road, and covered with corrugated tin he found stacked behind a warehouse that was being torn down. The owner of the house paid him $340 in cash. It was not a large amount of money even then, but it was the first time someone had paid Jasper Cullins for something he had made from nothing. And that feeling, that specific feeling, was the only thing that stayed constant across the 42 years and $1. $8 billion that followed. He had not started with connections. He had not started with investors. He had started with a used truck, a set of tools he knew how to use, and the understanding, learned early and learned hard, that the people who built things were rarely the same people who owned the buildings those things became. He intended to be both. By the time he was 30, he owned 4 rental properties in South Memphis. By 40, he had developed his first commercial strip on Getwell Road. By 50, his name was on the side of a building downtown, and it was one of 11 he owned outright within a 6-block radius of the Meridian Commerce Tower, where his office now sat on the 31st floor. The office itself was not showy. Jasper had never trusted showy. A wide desk, clean. 2 chairs for visitors, both intentionally slightly lower than his own, a habit he had picked up from a man he used to work for and had never stopped using. 1 framed photograph on the wall, not an award, not a magazine cover, but a photograph of his mother standing in front of the first house he had ever bought her, on Gill Avenue in Whitehaven, taken in 2003. She was smiling in the way that people smile when they have stopped expecting things, and then something happens anyway. He looked at that photograph every day. He did not always think about what it meant, but he looked. His daughter Petra was 34 years old. She lived in Nashville now, teaching at a community school on the north side of the city. He knew this because his assistant had told him, not because Petra had. She had not called him in 4 years. He had called twice in that time, both calls going to voicemail, both voicemails listened to and not returned. He had stopped after the second one, not because he did not want to reach her, because he had spent 30 years learning that the right response to silence was to wait for a better opening, and that lesson had served him well in business and had cost him everything in every other room of his life. The last real conversation they had was on a Thursday afternoon in October 4 years ago. Petra had called to tell him she had been accepted into a teaching fellowship in Nashville, a 2-year program working with kids in underserved schools. She was excited. He could hear it. He was in the middle of reviewing a contract, a parcel on the south end of Binghamton, that he had been trying to close for 6 weeks. He remembered the contract more clearly than he remembered the words he said to Petra, which was its own kind of answer. What he remembered was this. He had said that teaching did not pay enough to build anything real on, and that she had options, and that he wished she would think more carefully about the long term. She had not responded right away. Then she said one sentence, quietly, with no particular anger in it, which somehow made it worse. Dad, you have never once looked at something and seen it for what it was instead of what it was worth. Then she was gone. He finished reviewing the contract. He signed it the following morning. He had not spoken to her since. The Carnes Avenue transaction had come through a broker named Philip Estes, who moved mid-range properties in South Memphis, and who Jasper had used 3 times before without incident. Imani Weathers had listed the property through Estes with a brief summary: 3-bedroom residence, Orange Mound, seller acting under power of attorney on behalf of elderly family members seeking to liquidate. Price, $340,000, firm, cash, or pre-approved financing only, 30-day close. Jasper's acquisitions team flagged it as a reasonable portfolio ad. Orange Mound was a neighborhood they had been watching. The price was $61,200 below the area average, which the summary attributed to the family's need for speed. The team recommended. Jasper approved. There was one photograph in the file, a standard exterior shot, and he almost closed the folder without looking at it. Then something made him pause. In the front yard, slightly left of center, stood a large magnolia tree, old enough that its canopy had spread beyond the roofline. He looked at it for a moment. He thought of his mother's yard on Gill Avenue, the oak she had refused to let him cut down when he renovated the property, the way she had stood in the driveway with her arms crossed and said, "Some things are not yours to decide." He closed the folder. He signed the check. His assistant was a woman named Lorena Price, who had worked for him for 7 years, and who had the specific quality of someone who understood that her job was not to agree with him, but to be right. On the Thursday after the check was delivered, Lorena placed a single sheet of paper on his desk without a word. It was a printout cross-referencing the Shelby County notary record with a public hospital filing. The power of attorney showed Roy Weathers signing on the afternoon of March 14, 2023, at the offices of Imani Weathers on Poplar Avenue. The Methodist Le Bonheur outpatient record showed Roy Weathers present at a cardiology appointment on the same afternoon, same hours, 2 different buildings, 1 signature. Lorena said nothing. She did not. Jasper read the page. He placed it in the top right drawer of his desk and closed the drawer. He had a call in 4 minutes. He took the call. He told himself he did not think about the page for the rest of that afternoon. It stayed in the drawer for 14 days. Imani drove to Orange Mound on a Saturday morning, 3.5 hours after clocking out at Bluff City Regional. She had not slept. She had not eaten anything except half a granola bar from the cup holder of the Civic, found somewhere around the exit for Covington Pike. She spent the 41-minute drive running through what she knew, which was not much, and what she suspected, which was more than she wanted it to be. She had called Devante twice from the stairwell after hanging up with her mother. Both calls went to voicemail. She did not leave a message. Some conversations did not belong on voicemail. She turned onto Carnes Avenue at 8:23 in the morning. She saw them before she reached the house. Mama Cora was sitting on the front porch in the chair with the faded green cushion that had molded itself to the shape of her over years of sitting. Daddy Roy was beside her, not moving, looking out at the street with the expression of a man who had decided the best thing to do right now was nothing at all. 2 bags sat on the porch between them, not packed with urgency, packed with the careful folding of people who had lived long enough to know how to do hard things with dignity. Imani parked and sat for a moment before getting out. She looked at her parents on their own porch with their bags between them, and something moved through her chest that did not have a name, but that she recognized as the thing you feel when the world confirms a fear you have been carrying for a long time. She walked to the porch. She sat on the top step without saying anything. The magnolia tree stood in the yard. One low branch had a strip of faded Christmas ribbon tied around it, pink from some years she could not remember. Her mother said, "They came Thursday, a man with papers. He said the property had been transferred. He showed me Roy's signature and the notary stamp, and I did not know what to say because it looked real. I called Devante that evening. He said it was handled. He said we could stay through the end of the month." Imani looked at the ribbon on the magnolia branch. Through the end of the month. She found Devante at his office on Poplar Avenue that afternoon. He did not stand when she came in. He gestured to the chair across from his desk the way he had learned in law school, with the economy of movement that said, "This is a meeting and I am running it." Imani did not sit, she said. Tell me what you did. He explained without raising his voice, which was worse than if he had. Daddy Roy had signed a power of attorney 8 months ago authorizing Devante to act on his behalf in financial matters. Given Roy's health, given his cognitive decline, it was a reasonable precaution. Devante had used that authority to execute the sale of 2847 Carnes Avenue for $340,000. The proceeds had been applied to outstanding family debts, to expenses he had managed quietly on the family's behalf for years without recognition, and to the $8,000 Imani had lent him in the spring, which he was now considering settled. He said it the way a person says something they have rehearsed enough times that they no longer hear how it sounds. Imani stood across from him and thought about the winter coat she had bought him when he was 11 because his mother could not afford one. She thought about driving him to law school orientation because he did not have a car. She had believed in him before the world gave him any evidence he deserved it. She said one thing. You used your father's name to take your family's house and then you called it a debt. He did not flinch. That was the worst part. She left with one thing she had not had when she arrived. Her mother had pressed it into her hand at the door that morning, wrapped in old newspaper. A deed, handwritten, dated April 9th, 1991, signed by Roy and Cora Weatherblu Inc., faded to the color of a clear sky just before dark. At the bottom, a stamp in red, the seal of Greater Hope Baptist Church, and beneath it, the signature of Reverend Aldous Beaumont, witness and notary, Shelby County, Tennessee. Mama had said, Reverend Beaumont told me the day we signed it. He said, Cora, put this somewhere nobody can get to. He said some things need a paper trail that does not go through any office but yours. Imani took the deed to 2 law offices over the next 2 days. The first was on Union Avenue. The attorney looked at it for 4 minutes and said that handwritten deeds from 1991 were not automatically invalid, but that the Shelby County Digital Registry would take precedence in any current dispute. Getting the deed formally recognized would require a title examination, a chain of custody filing, and a contest of the existing transfer. His estimate for initiating that process was between $14,000 and $18,000 before the first hearing. He said this without unkindness. He said it the way people say things that are true and unhelpful at the same time. The second office said the same in different words. Imani had $1,847 in her checking account. That night, she sat in the parking lot of a Walgreens on Elvis 5 minutes Presley Boulevard for 47. He's in the passenger seat. She looked at her mother's signature in the old blue ink, at the red stamp at the date, April 9th, 1991. 32 years of a life in a house the county system did not currently recognize as belonging to the people who had lived in it for 32 years. She did not cry. Crying in parking lots solved nothing and cost her things she could not afford to spend. She sat still and let herself think the thought she had been pushing away since Thursday morning. Maybe the system was not designed to find this deed. Maybe Devante knew that. Maybe that was exactly why he had done it this way. She sat with that for a long time, and then she started the car. She had a shift in 6 hours. She was not done. She did not know yet what not done looked like from here. The deed was still on the passenger seat when she pulled out of the lot. She did not put it away. The call from his architect came on a Tuesday morning, 17 days after Lorena had placed the paper on his desk. The foundation survey on the Carnes Avenue property had flagged a drainage issue along the south wall that needed eyes on it before renovation plans could be finalized. Standard procedure. Jasper's project manager could have handled it. Jasper told him he would go himself. He did not examine that decision too closely. He drove to Orange Mound alone in the F-150, without Lorena, without his project manager, without anyone who would have occasion to ask why the owner of a $1.8 billion development company was personally visiting a $340,000 residential property on a Tuesday morning. He took Lamar Avenue South and turned onto Carnes at 10:14 a.m. He parked. He sat a moment before he got out. The magnolia tree was larger than it had appeared in the file photograph. Its canopy spread out over the front yard and past the property line, shading the sidewalk on both sides. It was the kind of tree that had been there long enough to stop belonging to the lot it grew on and start belonging to the street itself. Jasper stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for a moment longer than a man assessing a drainage problem needed to. An elderly woman was sitting on the front porch. She was watching him, not with suspicion, with the patience of someone who had learned that most of what life sent to your front door eventually explained itself if you waited long enough. Jasper walked to the porch. He said, "Good morning, ma'am. I own the property currently." The woman said, "I know who you are." Devante told me a man named Cullins bought the house. She paused. "I am Cora Weathers. I have lived here 33 years. Jasper stood at the bottom of the porch steps and looked at her. She was a small woman, compact in the way that certain people become compact with age, as though they have distilled themselves down to what is essential. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked at him with the directness of someone who had done her crying in private and was now done with it. He said, "How long has that tree been here?" Cora looked at the magnolia. She said, "I planted it the spring we moved in, 1991. Took it from a seed off my mother's tree. Her tree came from her mother's yard. The tree I took the seed from is gone now. But this one is still here." Jasper thought of his mother's oak on Gill Avenue, the one she had refused to let him cut down. "Some things are not yours to decide," he said. "I am going to need to ask you some questions about this property." "About the transfer," he stopped. "I am not here to rush you out. I want you to know that." Cora looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "That is the first time anyone connected to this situation has said that to me." He sat down on the bottom porch step. He listened. She told him about Roy's health, about the power of attorney, about the Thursday morning when the man came with papers. She told him about Devante, careful with her words, not to protect him, but because she had raised herself not to speak about family with more anger than the facts required. She told him about Imani, who had been sending money home for 11 years and was now driving back and forth from Whitehaven trying to fix something that should never have needed fixing. She mentioned the deed in her house coat pocket that she had been carrying for days, unable to stop touching it the way you cannot stop touching a sore tooth. Jasper did not check his phone. He did not look at his watch. He sat on the bottom step of a house he legally owned and listened to the woman who had planted the tree shading both of them. He drove back to the Meridian Commerce Building and went to his office and closed the door. He opened the top right drawer. He took out the page Lorena had left there 17 days ago and read it again, though he had not forgotten a word of it. Same hours, 2 different buildings. One signature. He read the Carnes Avenue file from the beginning, this time slowly, as someone looking for what he had not looked for before. The power of attorney documentation, the notarization, the timeline, the things that had looked like paperwork when he was in a hurry and looked like something else entirely when he was not. His legal counsel at Whitmore and Associates on the 22nd floor would tell him the same thing they always told him when a transaction had complications. Assess your exposure, protect your position, document everything. They would be right in the specific way lawyers are right when they are telling you how to stay safe without asking what that safety is costing someone else. He did not call them, not yet. He sat with the file and thought about Petra, not the 4 years of silence. The sentence, "Dad, you have never once looked at something and seen it for what it was instead of what it was worth." He had signed the check on a Wednesday afternoon without asking a single question. He had looked at a photograph of a magnolia tree, thought of his mother, looked away and signed his name. He had not built the fraud, but he had completed it. His check was the last thing that had made it real. He sat for 22 minutes. Then he picked up the phone and asked Lorena to find him a number for a woman named Imani Weathers, a CNA at Bluff City Regional Hospital. He did not know yet what he was going to say to her. He knew what he was not going to do. He was not going to be the last person in the chain anymore. Imani was in the break room at Bluff City Regional at 6:17 in the morning, 11 minutes before the end of her shift, eating a sleeve of crackers from her locker when her phone rang with a number she did not recognize. Memphis area code. She almost let it go to voicemail. She picked up. The man said his name was Jasper Cullins. He said he owned the property at 2847 Carnes Avenue. He said he needed to speak with her in person, that the subject was the transfer of that property, and that he believed she deserved to hear directly from him what he intended to do about it. Imani sat with the crackers in her hand and said nothing for 4 seconds. Then, she said, "When?" They met 2 days later at a diner on South Parkway called Reedley's, the kind of place with coffee that came in thick ceramic mugs and a menu laminated so many times the words had gone slightly soft at the edges. Imani arrived 7 minutes early and took a booth by the window. She brought the deed in a manila envelope. She was not going to walk into this room without it. Jasper arrived on time in a plain gray shirt and work boots he had worn to every job site for the past 12 years. He sat down across from her. He did not offer his hand. He said, "Thank you for meeting me." She said, "Say what you came to say." He put a document on the table, not a check. A letter on Cullins Development Group letterhead, signed and notarized that morning, stating his intent to initiate a voluntary rescission of the Carnes Avenue transaction and to file a formal complaint with the Shelby County Register of Deeds citing irregularities in the notarization of the power of attorney. Attached was the cardiology appointment record, cross-referenced with the notary timestamp. Attached to that was a letter from Whitmore and Associates confirming they had been retained to support the rescission. He had called his legal counsel the morning after sitting in his office for 22 minutes. They had asked him to sleep on it. He told them he had already slept on it for 17 days. Imani read the document twice. Then she took the deed from the manila envelope and placed it beside the letter. She said, "This is what my mother has been carrying in her housecoat pocket." Jasper looked at the deed, at the red stamp, at the signature of Reverend Aldous Beaumont in careful cursive from a man who had understood that someday the careful cursive would matter. He said, "That is going to matter a great deal." She said, "Why are you doing this?" He turned the coffee mug in his hands once. Then he said, "Because I was the last signature on a document that should never have been signed. And I am tired of being a man who does not ask enough questions before he signs things." He paused. "And because I sat on that porch step and listened to your mother, and I am not able to unhear what she told me." Imani looked at him. She had come ready for almost anything except this. Ready for an offer with conditions. Ready for a negotiation dressed as generosity. Ready to fight for every inch the way she had been fighting since the Saturday she turned onto Carnes Avenue and saw her parents sitting on their porch with their bags. She said, "The legal fees, the title examination. I have been quoted between $14,000 and $18,000 to begin this process. I have $1,047. He said, "My firm will handle the legal costs," she said. "I am not going to owe legal costs." He said, "You will not owe me anything. What happened to your parents' home happened in part because I did not do my job. The cost of correcting that is mine to carry." A silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. The silence of two people who have said the true thing and are now deciding what comes next. She said, "All right. According to the Tennessee Attorney General's office, deed fraud and elder financial exploitation cost Tennessee residents more than $67 million annually. Under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 3914-114, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a felony offense. Victims and their families can file complaints with the Tennessee Adult Protective Services and the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division at no cost. Most people who are targeted never know these resources exist. Devontae filed a civil complaint against Jasper 3 days after the rescission letter was submitted. He sought $680,000 in damages, twice the transaction price. His attorney sent a copy of the complaint to 3 neighbors on Carnes Avenue and to the pastor of Greater Hope Baptist Church with a cover letter suggesting that Imani had manipulated an outside party to overturn a legitimate family financial decision. The pastor of Greater Hope Baptist, Reverend Odessa Fitch, had known Cora Weathers for 21 years. She read the letter on a Thursday evening. She thought about it overnight. On Friday morning, she made 2 phone calls. The first was to Willa Prater at 2851 Carnes Avenue, who had been the Weathers family's neighbor for 19 years and who had, at a community meeting in the spring of 2022, watched Roy Weathers sign a neighborhood petition and noticed his handwriting had changed in a way that concerned her. Willa had kept the petition without knowing why. Something had told her to. The second call Reverend Fitch made was to the Tennessee Adult Protective Services intake line. The community of Orange Mound had been quiet the Saturday morning Imani arrived and found her parents on the porch. Quiet in the way people are quiet when they do not know which way something is going to fall. Now they could see which way it was falling. Will Prater walked into the Shelby County Register of Deeds office on a Monday morning with the 2022 petition. She did not call ahead. She handed it to the clerk and said, "I need someone to compare this signature to a notarized document from March of last year and explain to me how a man whose handwriting looked like this could have signed something that clearly 9 months later." The clerk looked at the 2 signatures. She looked at Willa. She said, "Let me get my supervisor." The Shelby County Register of Deeds issued its formal determination 9 months and 11 days after the rescission letter was first submitted. The language was administrative and largely unreadable to anyone not trained in parsing documents to say everything they need to say and nothing more. But the conclusion was clear. The transfer of 2847 Carnes Avenue executed in March of 2023 was invalid. The power of attorney had been improperly obtained. The deed dated April 9, 1991, bearing the seal of Greater Hope Baptist Church and the signature of Reverend Aldous Beaumont, had been authenticated and entered into the Shelby County Digital Registry. Ownership of 2847 Carnes Avenue was restored to Roy and Cora Weathers. The determination arrived on a Tuesday. Imani read it on her phone, sitting on the edge of her bed in Whitehaven at 2:31 in the afternoon, 3 hours into the first real sleep she had gotten in 2 days. She read it twice. Then she sat with the phone in her lap for a long time without doing anything. She did not call her mother right away. Some things need a moment before they become real enough to share. Devontae Weathers appeared before the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility 6 weeks after the county determination. The board had received the APS complaint, the Whitmore documentation, the signature comparison, and the cardiology record from Methodist Le Bonheur. His attorney argued procedural objections on 4 separate grounds. The board dismissed 3 of them. At the end of that process, Devontae's license to practice law in Tennessee was suspended 3 years. Reinstatement conditional on a full ethics review. The civil complaint against Jasper was dismissed, with prejudice 8 days before the suspension was announced. Imani did not attend either proceeding. There was nothing for her in that room. The thing she had needed was already done. Jasper absorbed the $340,000 loss from the rescission. Legal costs added another $47,000. The civil complaint had cost him 4 months of his legal team's attention and reputational uncertainty with 2 pending partners. He had been right when he told himself it would cost something real. It had. 3 weeks after the determination, he transferred a vacant lot adjacent to the Weathers property to Greater Hope Baptist Church at no charge. He filed it on a Wednesday afternoon and did not issue a press release. Lorena sent the confirmation to his email at 4:47 p.m. He closed his laptop. He went home at a reasonable hour for the first time in longer than he could remember. Petra called him on a Sunday morning in November. The call lasted 22 minutes. Nothing was resolved. That was not what the call was for. The call was for the thing that has to happen before anything can be resolved, which is 2 people deciding they are both still there. When it ended, Jasper made himself breakfast. He could not remember the last time he had done that on a Sunday morning. It turned out he still knew how. The house on Carnes Avenue was repaired that fall. The south wall drainage issue was fixed. The front porch steps, soft in 2 places for years, were replaced. The magnolia tree stood where it had always stood. It did not need anything done to it. It was already fine. Imani drove to Orange Mound on the first Saturday in December. She parked in the driveway and knocked on the door out of habit, even though it was her parents' house and had been her parents' house her entire life. Cora opened it and said, "You do not need to knock," and Imani said, "I know, Mama," and came inside. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, the same table Roy had brought from an estate sale on Central Avenue in 1994, and Cora had complained about the scratch on the left leaf and then covered it with a tablecloth and never mentioned it again. The tablecloth was still there, the scratch was still under it, the furnace still rattled, the back door still needed lifting to open, the magnolia was still in the yard. Some things stay exactly as they are, not because no one noticed, but because they became part of the house and the street. 33 years of a life built in one place by 2 people who had decided this was where they were going to stand. After dinner, Imani sat on the front porch in the chair with the faded green cushion. The December air was cold but not bitter. A neighbor had strung lights along his gutters. The magnolia tree was dark against the sky, but she knew its shape without needing to see it clearly. Her mother came out with 2 cups of sweet tea. They sat and did not say much. They had said most of what needed saying over the past 9 months, in kitchens and parking lots and phone calls at 3:47 in the morning, and once in a diner on South Parkway where Imani had put a document on the table and surprised her in the one way she had not prepared for. After a while, her mother said, "You hungry?" Imani said, "Mama, we just ate." Cora said, "I know. I am just asking." They sat in the cold a while longer. Down the street, the lights came on, slow and warm, 1 string at a time. Then, Imani asked the question she had been holding for 9 months. She said, "Mama, why did you keep that deed all those years?" Not in a filing cabinet, under the bed, in a Crisco tin, behind the winter coats. Cora thought about it. She picked up her sweet tea. She took a slow sip. Then she said, "Reverend Beaumont told me something the day we signed it." He said, "Cora, people can take a lot of things from you, but they cannot take what they do not know you have." She set the cup down. She did not say anything else. Imani looked out at the magnolia tree, standing dark and still against the December sky. Her mother had carried that deed in a tin box for 33 years, not because she understood property law or anticipated fraud or planned for the crisis that eventually came. She carried it because a man she trusted had told her to, and because she had learned, in the particular way that certain people learn certain things, that the things most worth keeping are often the things nobody else thinks to ask about. Somewhere in the house behind them, Roy Weathers was watching television, the volume up the way he always had it. A sound as familiar as the furnace rattle in the door that needed lifting. A sound that meant everyone was where they were supposed to be. Imani sat in her chair and let that be enough. Deed fraud targeting elderly Black homeowners is not a fictional problem. It is happening in cities like Memphis, Atlanta, Detroit, and Baltimore right now, in neighborhoods where families have held land for generations, and where the paper trail of that ownership is older than the digital systems meant to protect it. The people who run these schemes often know the families. They are neighbors. Sometimes they are relatives. They count on silence, on the reluctance of communities to name what is happening when the person doing it is someone they raised. What I have tried to show in this stories is that silence is not loyalty. Silence is the mechanism the fraud depends on. Cora Weathers kept a deed in a Crisco tin under her bed for 33 years because a reverend she trusted told her some things need a paper trail that does not go through any office but yours. That is not a detail I invented for drama. That is the kind of wisdom that has been passed down in Black communities across this country for generations by people who understood, long before any of us had words for it, that the system was not always going to see you. So you kept your own record. You held your own proof. You trusted the tin. I want to ask you something before you go. Has anyone ever told you to hold on to something without explaining why? A document, a letter, a phone number written on a piece of paper that you kept in a drawer for years because something told you not to throw it away? And did there ever come a day when you understood exactly why you had been told to keep it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Because I think more of us have a version of the Crisco tin than we realize. Something passed down, something preserved, something that looked like nothing until it looked like everything. This story is about a deed, but it is also about something harder to name. It is about the particular intelligence of people who have learned to survive systems that were not designed with them in mind. Cora Weathers did not go to law school. She did not know the phrase chain of custody or the Tennessee Code annotated. She knew a man she trusted had told her to keep a piece of paper, and she kept it for 33 years in a tin under her bed, and that piece of paper is the reason she is still in her house tonight. That is not luck. That is a form of wisdom this world does not give enough credit to. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. A parent, a neighbor, someone you know who is older and owns a home and might not know that what they have built over a lifetime can be targeted. Not to frighten them. To tell them to check their deed. To tell them where to keep it. To tell them that what Reverend Beaumont said to Cora Weathers in 1991 is still true. People can take a lot of things from you, but they cannot take what they do not know you have. If you are new here, subscribe. We tell stories about dignity, about people who hold on, and about the quiet ways that ordinary lives turn out to be extraordinary when you look at them closely enough. Turn on the bell so you do not miss the next one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Stay rooted, stay dignified, and never throw away what someone you love told you to keep.